The studio lights were bright, the cameras rolling, and the world was watching. It was meant to be a simple international roundtable, an event where leaders gathered to speak on Africa's progress. Among the guests were seasoned names: Donald Trump, former U.S. president, and sitting quietly at the end of the row, Captain Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso. The host smiled for the camera. Today, we speak of unity. But then, Traoré leaned forward, calm, unshaken, his voice low, but every word slicing through the silence. I have carried a secret for 12 years, one that involves the children of my country, and choices made by men sitting at this very table. Trump stiffened. The air in the studio froze. No one expected this, whispered a cameraman off-screen. Suddenly, the live chat exploded. Viewers felt something was coming, something heavy, something painful. Ibrahim Traoré didn't flinch. His eyes scanned the room, not accusing, but full of sorrow. You all deserve to know the truth. And just like that, what started as another panel discussion turned into the most watched live moment in modern political history. The secret was real, and it was about to change everything. Long before the cameras, long before the revolution, Ibrahim Traoré was just a soldier, a young man walking barefoot through dusty villages, seeing pain others ignored. He never spoke much, but he saw everything. In 2011, during a UN-backed aid operation in a remote part of Burkina Faso, Traoré witnessed something that would haunt him for the next 12 years. It wasn't war. It wasn't bombs. It was silence. Children in villages near Diebougou, thin, sick, quiet, were given strange vaccines. Labeled experimental aid, they were tested without consent. Days later, many of those children fell gravely ill, and no one talked about it. Back then, Traoré was too low in rank to ask questions, but he never forgot the mothers crying in the dust, or the government officials who flew in from the west, smiling for photos, then flying out before sunset. One of those officials? He later became a U.S. president. Traoré kept the files, photos, names, one tiny girl's last drawing, an elephant, colored with shaky hands. And now, 12 years later, he was ready to speak. But it wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. The truth that would shake every powerful room in the world. Back in the studio, the tension was unbearable. The camera zoomed in on Donald Trump, who hadn't spoken in several minutes. His usual bravado had faded. His hands, usually firm on the table, now trembled slightly. Traoré continued. He didn't shout. He didn't blame. He told a story, slow, emotional, true. Her name was Asetu. She was 6. Her mother sold tomatoes on the roadside. When the foreign aid trucks came, they promised vitamins, vaccines, better lives. He paused, eyes lowered. 3 days later, she couldn't walk. 1 week later, she stopped speaking. 2 weeks later, she died. Trump looked away. He blinked hard. The studio was dead silent. One anchor reached for a tissue. In the control room, producers stared at their screens, frozen. Traoré reached into his jacket and pulled out a small piece of paper. It was the girl's drawing, still faded but clear. He held it up for the world to see. I kept this because she mattered. The live chat exploded with crying emojis. Viewers posted, "I can't stop crying. This is breaking my heart," and Traoré speaks for every forgotten child. And still, Trump said nothing, not a single word, only silence. Traoré reached under the table and calmly placed a small black flash drive in front of the host. The host's hands hesitated before picking it up. "What is this?" she whispered. "It's the footage they erased from official records, but I saved it," Traoré replied softly. The screen behind them flickered. Then a grainy video played. The scene: a village clinic. A white tent labeled Joint International Health Mission. Children lined up barefoot under the sun. mothers holding their babies, Western doctors in clean coats laughing behind surgical masks. The camera panned to a young girl, Asetu, sitting quietly, her legs already trembling. Then came the moment that chilled everyone. A man in a U.S. government uniform, face partially visible, handed out sealed vials. His voice echoed in the room. "We call this Phase 1. Suddenly, Donald Trump's face on the studio screen went pale. He recognized the man. And so did many watching at home. The man in the video had been photographed beside Trump at a 2016 campaign fundraiser. The comment section exploded. This can't be real. Is this why he went silent? Why isn't anyone stopping this? But Traoré, he just looked straight into the camera and whispered, "I haven't even started yet." Tears began to fall, not from Traoré, but from a woman watching from a small living room in Ouagadougou. Her name was Mariam. She was Asetu's mother. She hadn't known this footage existed. She thought the world had forgotten her child. For 12 years, she had lived with the quiet grief of a mother whose child vanished into dust, without justice, without answers. But tonight, she saw her daughter's face on international television, not blurred, not censored, not erased. "Ibrahim," she whispered to the screen, "you remembered." Meanwhile, back in the studio, Traoré began naming names, quietly, one by one. UN officials, aid contractors, diplomats, a few from his own country who had sold their silence for American dollars. Not once did he raise his voice. His words weren't political. They were human. "I do not say this to shame," he said. "I say it so that no mother is left wondering why her child died." In the control room, a technician wiped his eyes. So did thousands across Africa, and even some in America. Because tonight it wasn't about borders. It was about truth, and the cost of pretending that nothing ever happened. For minutes, Donald Trump remained frozen. Then he leaned toward the microphone. I was not informed," he began. "If there were any violations, I never." But Traoré raised one hand, respectfully, quietly, powerfully, and Trump stopped mid-sentence. The silence was deafening. Traoré turned to him. "Mr. Trump, this is not about your words. It's about what we all allowed to happen." He reached into his jacket once more and placed something else on the table, a worn, dust-covered notebook. He opened it. Inside were handwritten notes, taken in secret by a nurse who had since died of unknown illness. The notes described a test batch labeled V9, distributed in 5 West African villages, all under the watch of US and EU observers. The nurse's final entry read, "I don't think they'll ever believe us. But if someone finds this, tell the world." And tonight, that's exactly what was happening. Commenters were now begging for justice. People were sobbing openly on live streams. Some were even calling Traoré the African Mandela, with fire in his soul. Trump's mic went dead. Not because of censorship, but because, at that moment, no words could fix what the truth had already shattered. As the room sat frozen, Traoré turned the page in the nurse's notebook. Behind the cover was a folded sheet. Carefully, he opened it, revealing a list of names. Children's names. 67. Each name handwritten, followed by their age and the name of the village they came from. All of them had one thing in common. They never lived past 10. Traoré didn't read the names aloud. He didn't need to. Instead, he said, "These are not just victims. They were dreams, laughter, dancers, teachers, sons, daughters. And we failed them." In the crowd, even the camera operators lowered their heads. One of the anchors turned away, trying to hide her tears. "I promised myself I wouldn't cry on air," she whispered, her voice cracking. Traoré gently placed the list on the table. "For 12 years I stayed quiet, not because I was afraid, but because I was preparing. Truth is not a weapon. It is a mirror. And across the world, mothers began posting their own stories. Comments flooded in. I lost my niece in the same village. We were told to stay silent. Thank you, Traoré. Finally, someone remembers. Then Traoré played a recording. It was grainy, old, barely audible, but it was enough to break millions of hearts. A child's voice. Hello, my name is Malik. I'm 8. I want to be a pilot when I grow up, so I can fly above the clouds and see if heaven is really there. The recording stopped. The room fell completely silent. That was all the boy had managed to say. Recorded on a cheap plastic audio device, gifted by an aid worker during the 2011 campaign. 3 weeks later, Malik passed away from internal bleeding, following a mystery injection. The death was ruled natural by foreign doctors. His parents were told to be grateful for the help. Traoré looked straight into the lens. He never made it to the sky, he said softly. But tonight, his voice has reached the world. In a house in Ghana, Malik's sister collapsed in tears. In Belgium, a doctor who once questioned the project dropped his coffee in shock because he recognized Malik's voice. He had tried to warn people, but no one listened. Until now. Something shifted. As the live broadcast continued, streets across West Africa filled with people, watching on public screens and phones. Children sat on dusty roads. Market women stopped selling. Taxi drivers pulled over. Everyone was listening. Because for the first time in years, someone was saying what they all felt, but couldn't say. On screen, Traoré stood slowly. He held the nurse's notebook in one hand and the child's audio player in the other. I didn't come here for revenge, he said. I came here to return voices that were taken. Then he looked at Donald Trump, whose face now showed something no one had ever seen before. Shame, not fear, not anger, but deep, undeniable shame. Traoré continued, if your silence helped build empires, then my voice will help rebuild children's futures. In the comments, people typed, this man is not just a president, he's a protector. My tears won't stop. How is this real life? Traoré speaks with the weight of 1,000 forgotten souls. For the first time, the broadcast was no longer about politics. It was about truth standing up without shaking. And Ibrahim Traoré was that truth. Traoré raised a worn object from the folder, a single rubber glove caked with red dust. The camera zoomed in. Viewers leaned closer. This, he said, was found buried near a remote health camp in northern Burkina Faso in 2012. It belonged to a child named Adama. Adama was 9 years old when his mother brought him to the foreign-run clinic. He had a fever, nothing more. But when she returned from fetching water, her son was gone. 3 weeks later, she found the glove buried in the dirt near the camp's edge. She held it every day like a prayer. The live broadcast played grainy footage of the woman, now old, weathered by grief, holding the glove to her chest. My boy never came back, she whispered. But I knew. They did something. Trump shifted in his seat, trying to interrupt, but Traoré raised his hand, calm, unshaken. I'm not here to blame, he said. I'm here to unbury the truth. Online, viewers sobbed. One comment read, I can't stop crying. I have a son. He's 9 too. And just like that, the story of one missing child touched millions of hearts. Traoré's voice lowered. Most of the world never saw what I saw. He described a room, hidden in a compound near Ouahigouya. No signs, no cameras, just 4 steel walls, 1 bed, and no windows. That's where the children went. In 2013, while still a young soldier, Traoré and a few men intercepted a shipment of medical crates destined for the camp. But instead of medicine, they found used syringes, bags of expired drugs, and something else, small wristbands marked with the initials XU7. When they returned to the site, the room was gone. But a nurse, whom he never named, gave him the notebook before disappearing. And with it, a warning. What you found is connected to people far bigger than this country. Now, in the studio, Traoré reached into his jacket and placed one of the wristbands on the table. The initials glowed faintly under the studio lights. Trump stared at it, then looked away. "You knew, didn't you?" Traoré asked softly. Trump didn't answer. The air turned cold. This was no longer a broadcast. It was a courtroom of global conscience. And the jury, the entire world. No one expected what happened next. Traoré, strong, composed, disciplined, began to cry. Not loud, not dramatic. Just 2 quiet tears, one for Adama, one for Malik. "I have led battles," he said, voice trembling. "I've watched brothers fall in war, but nothing haunts me like the eyes of those children who trusted us, who believed the world was coming to save them." He paused, then looked again into the camera. And instead, the world sold them for power, for profit, for silence. All over the globe, people watching began to cry with him. A U.S. veteran tweeted, "I've seen a lot, but this man's tears just broke me." A news anchor in Nairobi whispered, "We are watching history. A man tearing down walls with nothing but truth." For the first time, even Trump looked shaken, not by the accusations, but by the raw human truth in the room. And still, Traoré hadn't revealed the final part of the secret, because what came next would not only explain the past, but change the future, forever. With the world hanging on his every word, Captain Traoré slowly pulled out a folded photograph. The camera zoomed in as he placed it on the table. It showed a boy, Adama, smiling in front of a military helicopter. But in the background, barely visible, stood a man in a beige suit. Traoré looked straight into Trump's eyes. "You were there," he said quietly. Trump didn't speak. He couldn't. This photo was never released. It was taken by a foreign contractor who later disappeared. The only reason I have it is because a janitor found the negative, tucked inside an air vent, before the entire camp burned down. The studio fell into a vacuum of silence. Even the seasoned anchor, with decades of breaking news under her belt, covered her mouth with shaking hands. Thousands of viewers flooded the live chat. Are we witnessing a cover-up? My heart is breaking. That boy had a future. Traoré picked up the photo again. This boy believed the world was good. He believed in men in suits. He held it to his chest. But his story never made the news. Until now. Traoré pulled out a bundle of small envelopes, yellowed by time. "These were never meant to be seen," he said. They were letters written by the children, found in a locked drawer hidden inside the ruins of the clinic. Scribbled in French and broken English, each one was a cry for help. He read one aloud. "To the President of the world, I want to go home now. Please tell the white men I'm not sick anymore. I miss my goat. Her name is Aya. Adama, age 9. Trump looked down. His hands trembled slightly. "These children were not lost," Traoré said. "They were taken, promised treatment, then vanished into the system, never to be heard from again." For a moment, the broadcast seemed frozen. Then the camera slowly panned across the faces of the audience, producers, journalists, even security guards, tears in their eyes. It wasn't about politics anymore. It was about children who should still be alive. Children who only wanted to go home to their goats and mothers. One viewer commented, "I haven't cried like this in years. This is humanity screaming." And the world listened. "I was just a young soldier," Traoré said, staring into the lens. "Barely 23. I didn't know how the world worked. I only knew what was right." He described the night it all changed, when he and 3 fellow soldiers found a hidden passage under the camp. They weren't supposed to be there, but curiosity pulled them deeper. They found empty stretchers, stained medical gowns, and 3 passports. All were American. All were fake. And in one of them, under the name John Graham, was a photo of a man who now sat across from him, Donald Trump. That was the night Traoré realized this wasn't just corruption. It was organized, protected, global. "I've carried this truth for 12 years, he said, voice cracking. "I buried it because I was told I would disappear if I spoke. But I didn't disappear. I rose." He stood. "I rose so I could speak for those who were silenced." A mother in Brazil, watching with her kids, clutched them tighter. A teacher in Ghana paused his classroom projector. And online, hearts broke. He didn't expose power to destroy it. He did it to protect the powerless. And he wasn't finished. Not yet. Trump had still not spoken. The room was tense. Viewers around the globe leaned in. And then, Captain Traoré said it. Just one sentence. One sentence that echoed louder than bullets. "You knew they were going to die, and you still smiled for the cameras." The silence that followed wasn't normal. It was the kind that tightens your throat. Traoré wasn't shouting. He wasn't angry. He was simply tired of burying the truth. He placed the final item on the table, a silver cross, bent and burned. "This was given to Adama by his sister the night before the trucks came," he said. "It was found next to a pit where they buried 17 bodies. Camera crews were crying. Even the translator's voice cracked. Trump finally spoke, but all he said was, "We did what we had to do." And then, Traoré stepped back. He looked not at Trump, but at the millions watching from home. His voice softened. They were children, not weapons, not data, children. And just like that, the whole world remembered something we had forgotten, what it means to care. No one was ready for what came next. With the whole world still watching, Captain Traoré reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of cloth. He carefully unfolded it. It was Adama's shirt. Torn, blood-stained, but intact. "This was given to me by the only survivor," he said. "A girl. A little girl who hid under a cot for 2 days after the massacre. She had held onto her brother's shirt until soldiers came back. She couldn't speak for 2 years after what she saw." Traoré laid the shirt gently on the table, his hands trembling. Then, for the final 30 seconds, he didn't speak. He simply stood, silent, eyes closed, head bowed. The camera held on his face. The weight of 12 years, the memory of the children, the ache of truth. Across the world, people cried. A firefighter in France took off his helmet and wept. A grandmother in the Philippines held her rosary tighter. A 10-year-old in Kenya asked his mother, why would they hurt Adama? And then, the screen faded to black. No outro, no music, just silence, the kind that demands action. The screen faded back in, this time showing a single candle burning in the dark. Captain Traoré's voice returned, calm but firm. If you're still breathing, you have a job to do. He wasn't talking to leaders anymore. He was talking to us. Be the voice they silenced, be the justice they feared, and never ever be too afraid to speak the truth. As the candle flickered, viewers could hear children singing softly in the background, a lullaby in Dioula, the language of Burkina Faso. Then his final words. Adama was one name. There are millions more. Don't let their stories end in silence. And now, dear viewer, if your heart is still beating, do something powerful. Comment below the name Adama so the world remembers him. Like this video if you cried, even a little. Subscribe now if you believe truth still matters, because this story wasn't just for views, it was for the voiceless, the forgotten, the brave, and if you're here now, that means you're one of them. So stand up, speak up, and press that subscribe button for Adama.